Hello and welcome to the first video on the Not the Old Firm YouTube channel. My name is Ben Banks and I'm joined with James Black. This is our new channel for Not the Old Firm. If you've not read or written content on the website, I strongly suggest that you do. We've got exclusive content going up there all the time, along with our accredited Scottish football content. That's been going for just under 2 years now, which is a bit scary to think for us, but we've finally got around to launching a YouTube channel where we'll be having all these exclusive interviews build up to the Scotland games like we have today, and all your Scottish Premiership, Championship, League One, League Two, and Lowland League coverage when and where we get the time. James, how are you?
Aye, not bad, mate. Yourself?
Aye, I mean, we decided to start a channel during the international break, which probably wasn't too wise. We're coming off a furlough and we've started when there's half the games than there already was, but plenty to talk about with Scotland. They take on Israel and Czech Republic this week in the Nations League. Israel coming on Friday at an empty Hampden Park as the games remain behind closed doors before a trip to Czech Republic on Monday. There's been a slight... people don't really know how to view these games. Are they warm-up games for the big ones next month as Scotland looks to qualify for its first tournament since 1998? Are they warm-up games or should they be looking to build momentum ahead of these two important matches?
I think it's daft to write them off as warm-up games because when you talk about the games next one, they're through the Nations League. So, I mean, it's this competition is all right. It's next season's or this season's one being played before the last one's finished. But no, it's silly to call it a warm-up. I think they're important games are an extra pathway into major competitions, and it's what 22 years since the last time Scotland was at a major final, so the hook of the crook getting there's massive for them.
I mean, I'm not making you feel too old like I don't do all the time, but I wasn't born the last time Scotland was at an actual tournament, so it would actually be nice to see it. But I think on these games this month, I think it's weird, see, because of the way things have panned out at the Euros. It was obviously meant to be and during the summer, and because of the current situation in the world, it's been cancelled into next year. So I think there's been a bit of confusion as to... There was already confusion around the Nations League as to what it is, but this is just adding to it because you're almost having to, what people don't seem to understand what we're qualifying for.
Aye, it is all a bit of a mess. What also doesn't help is that when you look at the Scotland squad, half of them aren't back domestically yet. You know, it's still pre-season for a lot of the English-based players, so you know their season isn't back. So there's kind of that little disconnect with fans and kind of quite what the Nations League's about.
Well, we'll have a bit of chat about the squad of the Robbie McCrory and Lyndon Dykes. Have got their first call-ups after good form for Livingston. Lyndon Dykes getting his move to Queen's Park Rangers last month off the back of that. He's chosen to pledge to Scotland over his native Australia, where he is from, and it looks like he will be the starting striker. Well, if he is the starting striker, he'll be the only striker because it's only one recognised striker in the squad, Lawrence Shankland and Oli McBurnie dropping out the squad through injury. Callum Patterson coming in to replace him, and Callum Patterson, as much as he is a good player, he's a right back, right mid, centre mid who's been shoehorned into striker in recent times. So it'll be interesting to see who he actually goes with up front, whether he'll follow the path Steve Clarke of a certain domestic manager and play no strikers up front. It remains to be seen, but it would appear as if Lyndon Dykes will be the man to sort of lead the Scotland front line this month.
Well, funny you mention about a certain domestic manager playing no striker, because one of the guys who used to fill that roles in the squad, you've got Ryan Christie there, so it could be an option. He could be the man that leads the line, but doesn't he lead the line for Scotland against Israel?
I know in modern football you play all these false nine type roles like Firmino at Liverpool and things like that, but I think just in terms of this is the perfect opportunity for Lyndon Dykes, I think, to stake his claim in the Scotland squad. He's proven himself in the big games against Celtic and Rangers, and I'm speaking to a couple of players that have played with him at Livingston, and they say that it's not just the goals he brings to the team, it's the overall package. I think he got 5 or 6 assists last season in the league on top of his 8 or 9 goals for Livingston. So it's that physicality up front. He's not somebody defenders like playing against, as well as the fact that he seems to be a decent penalty box striker. So if Steve Clarke, if there's ever a chance for him to get a chance in this squad, it's going to be now. And you'd like to think if he managed to get a goal or two like Lawrence Shanklin did. I know it was against the Faroe Islands, and I think it was San Marino last year when he got his chance. He got a goal or two. You'd like to think if Lyndon Dykes can get that ahead of the next month's more important games, then he would have a decent enough chance of making that squad as well when the likes of Oli McBurnie and Lawrence Shanklin are back fit.
I mean, I don't think he's been helped either by the coronavirus restrictions other than Johnny Russell. I think it would have actually been a decent chance for him to have properly staked the claim with McBurnie being out, Shanklin being out, Naismith being still not even in pre-season yet. It's been a good chance for Johnny Russell to have come in and played, but getting back to America proved to be a bit of a problem, so he missed it as well. I thought, when you look at the squad itself, it's very heavy in midfielders, like really, really heavy in midfielders. So I kind of thought maybe he'd have taken a bit of a gamble and I don't know, somebody like Kevin Nisbet at Hibs.
I think he was injured, to be fair. I think that's the problem as well. Right. Is that a few of the options were just all injured. Maybe Kevin Nisbet would have got that chance. I mean, he scored a hat-trick against Livingston and he's had two really good seasons at Championship and League One level for Wraith Rovers and Dunfermline. Maybe if he was fit because of the level of games that's going to be getting played and the lack of options, he would have got his chance. But I mean, when you look past, I mean, there's not really many out of like Lawrence Shanklin and Oli McBurnie. Fraser Hornby's maybe one, and under ones, I think he's probably, I don't know if that would have interrupted under 21 preparations for Scott Gemmell, but I would have liked to have seen him maybe come into the squad to get his chance. I mean, he's playing top flight Ligue 1 football this season, or the Uber Eats League, which is a fantastic name for a league. But he's playing over there now after a season in the top flight of Belgian football, having been brought through a Premier League academy. Would it have been a good chance to try him out, like Robbie McCrory's getting the experience behind John McLaughlin and David Marshall this month? I would probably say yes, given the lack of options. And given those lack of options, they'd have probably get a decent enough go at it as well, but not to be for him. Obviously, the big talking point this week was strikers at Scotland. On top of Lyndon Dykes has been Oli McBurnie, moving out of the squad after a foot injury before then appearing the same night for 45 minutes in a friendly against Sheffield United. Now, there were outcry on social media, there's articles written about it, just general confusion, people not really understanding why he was then playing when he was supposedly injured. Now, Steve Clarke moved to put out a statement saying why, saying that he basically had some sort of foot injury. I think it was a foot laceration that became infected, and there's a world of difference between a friendly and playing two international matches. Oli McBurnie has now come out and put out a statement saying he wanted to play through the injury, but decision was taken out of his hands, so was then basically forced to stay at Sheffield United for the month. James, what do you think about it? Because a lot of people have strong opinions on this.
I think people are just trying to make trouble. I genuinely don't see what the issue is. And this would apply to any player who plays for an English club or even a Scottish club out with the Premiership. The season hasn't started yet. Clubs are going through pre-season, and if clubs think that a player's not fit enough to go and travel with the national team and go and play what is going to be two competitive games, I don't see why anybody thinks there's an issue to them play 45 minutes of what is, to all intents and purposes, a glorified training session. I don't get it.
I think, just in general, I think Oli McBurnie, certainly over the last year, has been vilified by the Scotland support for reasons unbeknown to me. Because yes, he's not perhaps hit form for Scotland yet. He's not got a goal, which I think he probably needs to get the monkey off his back a bit. But I mean, who else have you? What other Scotland strikers are playing at the Premier League level every week right now? There's not many. Is Oli McBurnie going to come in and score every single game for Scotland? Probably not. But I mean, he's shown at Swansea how good he can be in terms of in front of goal. He's shown at Sheffield United that he can handle himself at Premier League level, and he's more than just putting balls in the net. I mean, I think his link-up play and stuff is what really, and his hard work for the team is what really sold him to Sheffield United fans last season. And it just seems to be a bit unfair. It just seems to be that he can't do anything right. Now, granted, he hasn't helped himself. I mean, you had that video last season where he was saying he didn't want a call-up and things like that. And I mean, that he said a couple of things off the park as well that certainly haven't helped his case. But, I mean, he's not the first Scottish player to have controversy surrounding him or perhaps underperform on the international stage. And
No, he's not the only current Scottish number 9 to have controversy.
who would the other be?
Griffith.
Well, the thing is with Griffiths as well is that I don't know whether his time has passed or not. Obviously, he's not been in his domestic club. He's not played much domestic football for whatever reason. I mean, I know there's been things this season, particularly that off the park issues again, just with like fitness and things like that. And he's not played in the Premiership this season. But I mean, he came back for Celtic and sort of before the lockdown and looked to be getting back to his best. And I think arguably in terms of who plays better for the national team, you would have to probably say on recent form when he plays, Lee Griffiths has been decent for the national team, whereas McBurnie still has got a bit to prove on that level. But I mean, if he's not fit, then there's no point picking him. I don't think anyway. But it is what it is. I mean, I think just in general, Scotland seem to be absolutely stacked on left backs and midfielders, but up front, I mean, even if you look at the ones coming through, like Fraser Hornby, James Scott, there's only really a couple that you could say, right, they could maybe step up into the national team in a few years. And Griffiths is what, in his 30s now? Oli McBurnie is probably the one that's going to lead the line for the next few years. So
yeah, McBurnie seems that he's going to be. I mean, barring somebody coming out for absolute left field and becoming, like some prodigious goal scorer, it looks like McBurnie's going to be Scotland's number 9 for the next 3, 4, 5 years anyway. And I mean, personally, I don't think he's a bad player, but I don't particularly think he's a good player. He's one of those ones who I see what his strengths are, and yeah, I can see why he can do a job for teams. But I don't know, it's kind of a damning thing for clubs that where are these guys coming through? Where are the young Scottish strikers that are kind of the next ones who should be pushing on? There's a complete lack of them.
one player we already mentioned we don't have any problems is left back. Kieran Tierney's back in the squad. I think he's missed over a year's worth of international football, which means Steve Clarke has a bit of a selection dilemma at left back. Does he keep playing Andy Robertson, who's obviously been and won the Premier League this season with Liverpool and is the Scotland captain? How does he fit Kieran Tierney into that sort of solution? One of the things being bandied about is that Kieran Tierney has played on the left-hand side of a three-back formation, and whether they'll be shoehorned in that way. I think I think they're both world-class players in my opinion now, playing at the top of their game. I mean, Kieran Tierney, had he continued the form he's shown sort of post-lockdown for Arsenal throughout the season, I think you could have probably said that it was some of the best form from a Premier League left-back last season, arguably on par with Robertson, despite him winning the Premier League. But, I mean, you need to fit them in somehow. So it's a case of where they play them and who's going to play best where.
I mean, one thing for me is that I don't think Kieran Tierney is going to be playing at left back. Greg Taylor's inclusion in the squad to me suggests that Taylor's the backup left back, whether there's rotation between the two games. But Greg Taylor's the backup. Otherwise, you would only have Tierney and Robertson. I think Tierney's going to be played at centre back. Actually, I'll think about this later on. We're going to kind of do a predicted 11 later on. And I was kind of thinking about kind of what sort of shape Scotland are going to go with. Because there's not really an obvious. I mean, probably Liam Palmer would be the one, but there's not really a screaming choice at right back the same way there is at left back. There's probably an argument you could put Palmer at centre back instead of right back, which only leaves you Stephen O'Donnell, which I'm no hugely sold on. Decent right back, but I mean, you compare and contrast the opposite flanks and it's chalk and cheese, So yeah, I think Tierney. I think Robertson's the absolute first pick. He's Premier League winner, European Cup winner. He's Scotland captain. He's not going to be shunted about to accommodate somebody else.
I think as well as Robertson has pretty much solely played left back.
Yeah.
Whereas Kieran Tierney has played right back, he's played left centre back, and he's also obviously more comfortable at left back, but I mean he's more than capable of playing left centre back, especially for games against Israel and Czech Republic and relatively not meaningless games, but not as important as games to come. So I think if they're going to try that this month, they should. I don't know, maybe a 3 works for Scotland now, just to get the best out of everybody, because it's a case of just getting the 11 best players Scotland have in the park for me at this point.
Yeah.
So
I think if you go with a 3, let's you play both Tierney and Robertson. And it probably, for me, I think Robertson's a far better attacking player than he is defensively. I think it lets you get much more out of Robertson. Because at Liverpool, he's not as defensively focused as he will be for Scotland. So having both him and Tierney lets Scotland double up in that kind of position. You can kind of rotate 2 of them in game and let one go and let one stay. And you've got 2 brilliant attacking fullbacks, and I think between the 2 of them, you get one good solid defensive fullback. The other side is a little bit different. I've got a feeling that you might see kind of James Forrest in that kind of right wing back type role.
Right, we're going to go through our predicted 11s, and me and James are going to rattle through some names and come up with one formulated 11 that we want to see play Israel tomorrow night. Starting with in goals, I think John McLaughlin's a pretty easy one to explain. He's on par for a clean sheet record at domestic level, and he's not really put a foot wrong so far this season. So I'd say that's a pretty easy pick, James.
Yeah, McLaughlin's the obvious one for me. David Marshall's not started this season yet. Robbie McCrory, I'm a big fan of Robbie, and it's great to see him get his first call up to the senior squad. I don't see him playing. That's very much one, I think, where he's in the group to sample the whole being a senior international pro and going away and doing all that kind of thing. And one very much looking towards the future for him. But McLaughlin will start on Friday night.
Centre backs, are you going with 3?
I think it's going to be 3. I think just looking at that squad, I think if a back 3's kind of, it seems more logical than going. I think it was more like a 4-5-1 in the last game. But I just kind of think looking at the way this group's set up, I think it makes kind of more natural sense.
Well, I've got 11 down here. I've got Scott McKenna, Liam Cooper, and Kieran Tierney as the 3 centre backs.
I would probably go with that. That probably makes more sense to me. I'd maybe see Palmer on the right of the 3, but I think Cooper most likely.
Right, wing backs, I've got James Forrest and Andy Robertson.
Yep, aye. It seems Forrest is. I think Forrest somebody that can really underappreciated by Celtic fans. I think I've kind of. I don't want to say grown to hate him, but he's just always there and always doing a job, and it always seems that kind of no matter where you put him in, he just kind of does what he needs to do. And we've seen him in that kind of wing back role plenty of times before in the past, and he's the obvious fit there for Scotland. And Robertson, he's a captain. He's just won the Premier League with Liverpool. He's former Queen's Park player, don't you know? But that's a kind of an obvious option.
Right, this is getting very, very easy. Midfield, again, I think midfield there's a lot of options, but for me it has to be John McGinn, Scott McTominay and John Fleck. Granted, Scott McTominay hasn't kicked a ball this season at all. John Fleck's played a few friendlies. John McGinn, I think, is probably in a similar boat. But if you're looking at Scotland's 3 strongest midfielders, for me, they're the ones. Fleck had a great season last season for Sheffield United. McTominay's been a regular at Manchester United, albeit he's dropped a wee bit down the pecking order now with Paul Pogba coming back in, and they've signed Donny van de Beek as we record this, I think, signed last night. So he'll probably be somewhere above him as well. And John McGinn, again, linked with big, massive moves to the likes of Manchester United. He's been brilliant for Aston Villa. So I think on their day, the three are the strongest centre mids. And even if they played 60 minutes, because I don't know how fit they all will be, I'm assuming pretty fit. It's not like back in the day where they had 8 weeks off and they come back overweight. I think I read a thing with McTominay this morning that he's only been off 2 weeks. So, I mean, he's pretty much he doesn't really need much of a pre-season. He should be absolutely fine, and the other two should be the same as well. What do you think?
This is where we disagree. I think it'll be Callum McGregor, Ryan Jack, and Scott McTominay. For two reasons. One, both McGregor and Jack have started domestically and they're flying. Both have done really well this season for Rangers and Celtic respectively, and have had good, strong starts. They're up to speed, and I think these are games where Scotland can't afford to start slowly. They need to have kind of everybody at it right from the get-go. So I think he's going to go with players who are already up to speed. As you said, McTominay, it's only 2 weeks since United finished the Europa League campaign. So he's been working along right through the whole summer. John Flex had most of the summer off. McLean at Norwich is the same. McGinn at Villa is the same. I think you might see him using. I think that had the games been the other way around, and it had been the Czech Republic first, there might have been a bit more of a gamble. But I think with it being Israel, in theory, it lets you kind of get the opening hour out of the way. Excuse me. Get the opening 60 minutes played. Hopefully get a goal or two advantage, and then you can bring in these players who haven't kicked a ball yet this season. Give them some minutes and try and get them up to speed ahead of the Czech Republic game on Monday. So you can bring in guys like John McGinn and kind of give them the last half hour against Israel.
Well, we've picked Scott McTominay, so he'll start, and we've both got two other picks. So you pick one of your midfielders, I'll pick one of mine.
Ryan Jack to anchor midfield.
Right, well, I'm then.
You were picking who, sorry?
John McGinn.
McGinn.
Oh, midfield McGinn, if you want to include the wing backs.
McGinn, Jack and McTominay.
Yeah, that'll be the midfield three. So we need two up front. We have one striker in the squad. So I've got Lyndon Dykes, and you were just berating him, Oli Buck. For me. Because, I mean, he's the only other one. For me, Callum Patterson is a decent player, but he started at right back, and I know he seemed to score more goals at right back than he did at striker. But I think he is a decent player. Whether he's good enough to start up front for Scotland, I don't know. Ollie Buck's at least played up there a few times for Scotland with some success in some games, and we don't really have many other options. So I think if you're playing two up front, it would need to be Ollie Buck. Because he's playing La Liga football as well, so he's playing at a decent enough level. I mean, not many other options, so him and Dykes.
Yeah, Dykes is the obvious one. I think it's set up for the Dykes start. The big question for me is whether you go with an out-and-out striker beside him or somebody to kind of play that number 10 role, which would then bring Stuart Armstrong into the equation. Maybe even Callum McGregor. I know we kind of just passed over him there. And Buck for me, as I said, I don't see enough, but in this case, no, I do think they're probably right here. I think he is most likely to be the one who partners Shankly, who partners Dykes.
Right, so who's going with up front?
With Dykes and Buck.
Right, so for Scotland 11, there should be a nice wee graphic appearing on screen presently. So we've got John McLaughlin, Scott McKenna, Liam Cooper, Kieran Tierney, James Forrest, John McGinn, Scott McTominay, Ryan Jack, Andy Robertson, and up front, Ollie Buck and Lyndon Dykes. That's who we think will start on Friday. Will we look ahead to the Czech Republic game while we're here?
Right, as well, We're here.
It's not much different for the Israel game. It's obviously, I mean, I don't know. I know a few managers domestically who we've spoken to have got their slight concerns about Scotland and some of the players travelling over to the Czech Republic, given the current situation that we live in with travel corridors and things like that. And I know some of these teams will need to go abroad themselves in Europe shortly, but it's slightly different when you can monitor them at your own club compared to they're in somebody else's care. So it'll be interesting, but Czech Republic, I think, away is a harder task than Israel at home. Played Israel a few times, you know what you're going to get in that. It should be a comfortable Scotland win. Czech Republic will be a bit more of a test to see. I think they're probably a nation similar in size in terms of football in the national scene just now as Scotland. So it'll be interesting to see how they do in that. But, I mean, do you look for a win or do you look for a positive performance?
Going away to the Czech Republic will be a much tougher task than Israel at Hampden. I know they're not as good as they once were, but they'll still be really well set up and a really kind of tough task for Scotland to break in. The big thing for me is going to be seeing just how the players respond to the lack of fans. It's one thing, kind of Hampden I think will be different a little bit in that, albeit Hampden's usually kind of rather noisy anyway, and it's a full vibrant place a lot of the time. Going away to places like Czech Republic, there's always that kind of very, very vocal band of Scotland fans who go along to these games, and they're not going to be present. So it'll be interesting to see just how Steve Clarke's side kind of respond, and if they start struggling or go behind.
I think a lot of these players have all played behind closed doors, especially the ones in the English Premier League. Like Scott McTominay's went from playing in front of 70,000 at Old Trafford every week to playing in front of nobody, really. So I think players will be, and even the Scottish Premiership players have now played 5 or 6 games behind closed doors. Hopefully, by the time we get to the next set of internationals, then some fans will be allowed into the ground to watch what could be a historic game. But I think the lack of fans thing, players are used to it now, but it's not something they really want to get used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just hopefully these are the only international games, at least here in Scotland, that are played behind closed doors, because I think the plans are at present for Ross County v Celtic after the international break to be a game where fans are trialled in the stadium. So hopefully all goes well with that, and then that can be a building block for the rest of the domestic game and the Scotland national team. But I think that's where we'll leave it today. We've covered quite a fair bit in that. So thank you if you've managed to get to the end of it. Subscribe to us on YouTube. It'd be a really big help for us just now as we start to launch this channel and try and grow it. Got some exclusive stuff on the way. We're hoping to have, if you've not already seen the written articles on the website, recommend you go and check them out. We'll have interview with Scotland under-19s international, now could be under-21s international should he make his debut next week, Lewis Fiorini, currently at Manchester City, and he gives us a really nice in-depth interview about his career so far and what you can expect to see from him on the national scene. In terms of their domestic game, we've also got interviews coming with Mark Milligan, former Australia captain and probably most notably for Scottish football fans, was once at Hibs, and he sort of reflected with us on his time at Hibernian, and that'll be coming out in the next week as well. On top of live reaction to Scotland-Israel, we will have a game, we'll have a video up, ASAP after the full-time whistle against Israel and Czech Republic, so you can get all your analysis and breakdown of the game here with us. But as I've already said, subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll see you next time.